Hello everybody, in this video I will show you how to connect remotely to a2.net so that you can work outside of your normal lab hours. The first and most important thing I have to ask before you do any of this is to keep in mind that you must not connect before 6 o'clock on weekdays, because there will be other labs running in there. And once you connect and you try to start up a virtual machine, you'll probably have a conflict of IP addresses with the person that's already using the computer in the class, and not to mention, of course, taking up the extra resources, something that would be very unfair to the students in the class. So if you are going to use the remote connection, please connect after 6 o'clock on weekdays. And of course, it goes without saying, you can connect throughout the entire weekend, all day, all night, whatever you like. All right. So in order to connect to a2.net, because a2.net is quite isolated network-wise from the rest of the world, you will need to use a software that's called X2Go. The easiest way to go about this is basically if you go to port AC UK/Linux. This is a website that belongs to IIS and offers lots of advice about how to use Linux in the university in general. There are a lot of topics. If you want, you can have a browse through here and you know see what's happening, see how we actually use Linux in the university. And of course, if we go to connecting remotely, you're not going to use SSH. SSH is used to connect to the other labs on the second floor of Anglesey building that are Linux based, which is 822 and 823. If you want, you can practice around with this and have a go. You are interested in using X2Go. Now, in this section, there is a button to connect to the VPN, but you don't need it because you will be connecting through our proxy server to get inside the university network. So we are in these sections. There is for Red Hat based Linux operating systems. So this means the one that you're using at home, Debian based like Ubuntu, and there's Windows and Mac OS. So if we expand the Windows scenario, we will find that we can go and download the client from here. You need to click on this link here, download X2Go client, Windows installer 7 or later. If you are working on OS X, then you need to get the appropriate version for the version of OS X that you have. And in fact, if you are working on OS X, there is one more thing that you need to do. You need to install something that's called Xquartz. Other than that, all of the rest of the information, all of the rest of the instructions are the same. But you need to install Xquartz. And after you do that, and in fact, after you install X2Go as well, you need to restart your Mac completely. And also you need to make sure that you go to your settings and give the appropriate permissions to all the applications to be able to use everything. All right. So let's go back into Windows. So the application itself, I've already downloaded and installed it. The installation is pretty straightforward. There's nothing weird about it. So when the application starts for the first time, it will open the new session window. So a session is every time you connect to the university and work. So I'm going to call this a2.net. You need a host, depending on which computer you're working on. This is your VLAN ID. So if you're working on computer Hawthorne that has an IP address that ends in 65, then you are on VLAN 65. I'm going to connect to my computer. So this is VLAN 11 for me. I'm going to use one of my test accounts on my computer, and I'm going to connect as VM2. You need to be anything from VM1 up all the way up until VM12, depending on what username you actually have been assigned to in the lab. You leave the SSH port the same to 22, and you use the proxy server for SSH connection. Our proxy server is ssh.e.port.ac.uk. You need to check the box that says same login as X2Go server so that you don't have to type in your username twice, and you leave the password to it being different, because you will have the password that you've set up in the lab, and you also need the password for our proxy server as well. The password is localhost1. So you will get two password requests when you try to connect. The first one will be your own password that you set up in the lab. The second one will simply be localhost1 to connect to the SSH server. Session type, we need to change it to Mate. And that's it. So if we hit OK, another important detail here is the resolution. You can have it in full screen. It's better to have it in full screen because it gives you the full space of your monitor, especially if you're working on a laptop with a smaller screen. However, I would recommend for the first time you go for something smaller so that you're able to manage everything, connect securely once, and then disconnect and change it to full screen later on. So we click here on the little seal, and now it's asking for our password, so the password that you set up in the lab. So that will be whatever you set it up as to be. And then it will ask for the SSH proxy password, which is localhost 1, and it's the same for everybody. It will connect. It will ask to exchange SSH keys. You must say yes to both the dialogues that come up. Of course, this only happens once, only happens the first time that you log in, so it's done it for me already. If it struggles with the resolution as it has in mind, don't worry, it will choose the resolution of itself and connect, and now you are in. Once you're in, you can do whatever you like. I would recommend that you open a terminal to begin with and type who. Who will show you who else is connected onto this local computer. So if you see any other VMs, VM4, VM5, whatever, anything else other than yours, it means that somebody else is actually sitting on that computer and working on it at the same time. So I would recommend that you disconnect and try again at another time, because if you do try to start it, for example, if their Prometheus virtual machine is running, so in case that somebody else is working remotely on that computer as well, then that means that you will not be able to get an IP address for your Prometheus virtual machine, because if you remember, they are bridged. So once one VM has it, then no other VM can actually take that IP address. In my case, for example, I'm connected as VM2, but I'm also logged in as root as well, and you can actually see the times that these sessions were started on the computer. So once you're verified that nobody else is working on the computer, you can start your VMware player and you can launch whatever virtual machine you want to start and go about your work. Once you're finished, it's very, very important that you do not close this window from here. Okay, this will basically kill your session. Everything that's already running in the session will keep running, and especially if it's your virtual machine and it keeps running remotely in a dead session that you've disconnected from, it means that you will not be able to start that virtual machine, your Prometheus virtual machine, when you are actually in the lab, and you'll have to restart the entire computer. The process will be killed. Your virtual machine might even get corrupted because of this. So it's very, very important. Once you're finished working, you go to system and you log out. Be very careful, don't shut down. If you shut it down, it will shut down the remote computer, and neither you nor anybody else will be able to connect remotely and work on it. And if somebody else is working on it, they will be kicked out and they will be logged out as well. All right, so log out and log out on this, wait for this and click cancel here, and you're done. You can then go and set this to full screen, and then the next time it starts, it will just take over your entire screen and work. Now, as for troubleshooting, there is one thing that could possibly go wrong in this, and it only happens in fully updated versions of Windows 10 and versions of Windows 11 as well, such as I'm running here. I've done this already. So you might get an error about a third line having a problem, an issue or so ever. So you might get a black terminal like this up when you're trying to connect, and it will say that, this line has been deprecated, blah, blah, blah. The problem is this new Windows terminal. So all you need to do is you need to go into this little arrow here, go into the settings, and set the default terminal application to Windows Console Host. The actual error that comes up for the connection is irrelevant because it doesn't really affect the connection. The problem is the pop-up window that it starts in order to tell you that this problem has happened is by default in Windows 11 and updated versions of Windows 10, a terminal window that will not close on its own after the error has come up. If you do change it to Windows Console Host instead of Windows Terminal that it is by default, then that window will actually never pop up. And as you saw on my computer, it will just work. You won't get any error messages and everything will work straight away. Okay, so if you do get that error message, remember to go to default terminal application and change it to Windows Console Host, and then you can basically connect to a2.net as much as you like, as long as you don't connect before 6 o'clock on weekdays. Okay, thank you very much. Goodbye.